All right, we're back in my garage for another winter build project, and as those of you that have seen some of my other videos know, the black bike here is my wife's, and the Amber Whiskey bike is mine. Last video, put on the new seat, and haven't really had a chance to check that out. It's been ice slick in our neighborhood for quite a while. One of the first things I did at the bike after our first long distance trip was to install the Legend rear shocks. So you can kind of take a peek down in there and see they're sitting right there. Outstanding shocks. They're adjustable for rebound, adjustable preload, and then did the same thing on my wife's. They, you can actually see in there a little bit better on hers. Hers were special ordered with 90-pound springs. Standard is 110. So they're willing to make some changes for you to adapt to the rider. She's only about 140 pounds with her gear on. So she was riding like a jackhammer with the old setup that came factory. I thought it was horrible from the factory as well, so I went ahead and attacked that. But now that we got some downtime, going to be doing the Legend front end, the Axeo. Let's see here. This is their Axeo cartridge front end for 2014 to 2016, I believe. Yeah, so there it is right there. So that's the 04140494. This is the standard ride height, not the lowered. They have a lowered option as well, but this would be standard. I had the same factory height for the rear shocks, which is a 12-inch, I believe. They advised for the best ride on the rears to move up to the 13. I went ahead and went with a 12. I could see where the benefit would be for the 13, but I didn't want to have the bike ride any higher than it was. So to open the box here, let's show you what you get. You get some fork oil, even though it doesn't work like a traditional fork setup. You get your top out springs that come in the bag, and then you get your cartridge system. So it's got like a, the best way I can describe it to somebody is it's kind of like a Bilstein shock setup, where you've got a floating piston in here that compresses, so it's like a two-stage dampening effect in the main shock up top, and then you've got your preload adjustable spring. So it's real simple. They're give you a rundown right there on making those adjustments. It's either 0 turns for a rider, 0 to 200 pounds, which is how I'll leave my wife, so we won't make any adjustment. And then mine, I'll turn it up 1 turn to increase the preload for a rider of 200 to 300. And then if you ride 2 up, you make a couple more adjustments to stiffen it up some. And that, again, that's only turning this little guy up just a tad. Spoke to Chase at Legend. He explained what this gap was all about, because that kind of threw me off. I'm like, well, did somebody turn that up on accident or what? He said this gap is normal, so just you're turning up from here, but he did advise once you loosen this up, make your adjustment, put some red Loctite on that nut, and cinch it down so it doesn't come loose in your shock. They do have one centering cup that comes with this guy, because some of the forks from Harley have a cartridge shock on one side and a dampener on the other, and they don't have one of these on one of the sides. So you get one, you reuse the stock one if you need to. And that's the only adjustment down here. There's no rebound adjustment on these guys. Once you put them in place, that is pretty much it. So we're gonna be doing that install today. I'm gonna put it on high speed or time lapse or something. We'll see if I can get it usable information for you. Also, while I was doing that, I knew I kicked myself in the ass if I didn't do one other thing, and that is switch to chrome fork lowers. So I got these fork lowers for about 90 bucks cheaper than Harley sells them for off Board Tracker Harley. So these guys are going in. The fork lowers come with a little bit of a rebuild kit with all the seals. I'm kind of a freak whenever I take this kind of stuff apart. I went ahead and also ordered the full Harley rebuild kit for these forks, just to make sure that once I do this, I don't have to touch these forks for another 40,000 miles. Also to match, going with the fork shroud, chrome fork shroud. So that's going to get installed as well. Got caliper bolts, bolt kits, and then some new bolts for the fender. So you get chrome fender bolts, all that, and then some axle nut covers to round it off. And then I was also order a spare, because I'm doing 2 of these bikes. I'm going to be doing my wife's as well. This is probably the 10th set of front forks that I rebuilt. First set on a Harley. So you're going to see me fumble through this for the first time. Never having done fork rebuild on Harleys. Never having to take, I've never taken the front tire off a Harley or anything. So this is going to be kind of all new. Chase gave me a rundown when I talked to him. He offered to call me and give me a little bit of information from Legend. And hopefully his advice gets me through this nice and smooth, and you guys will get a look at what I'm doing here. So I'm just going to set up the tripod and get to tearing the bike down. We'll run this at high speed. I'll stop if something gets interesting. I want to point something out. I should mention that I've got the service manual on my laptop. That's going to have all the torque specs on all the nuts and bolts and everything that goes back on. You're going to want to hit those torque specs and use Loctite on everything you're doing. Keep that in mind. Harley's shaped like a bitch, so they're going to back out bolts if you don't Loctite them and get them right to the right spec. One of my favorite little toys for doing work like this is some magnetic trays. Bolts and nuts just stick right in there. Throw one on each side of the bike, throw one on a floorboard. You got places to put your stuff, doesn't roll everywhere. Axle nut, 5/16. Got a lot of Harley, 6mm. I'm going to take this bolt all the way out because you're going to need to get to the bolt that comes up through the bottom, your drain hole, and then that holds the all the cartridge stuff together. I'm going to want to put Loctite on this when we're all done. Calipers have to come off too. These are a 12-point socket, and I'm going to take them, zip tie them up to the bars, get them out of the way, make sure they don't hit the fender. Once those are popped off, you gotta be real careful. You gotta kind of walk the caliper out a little bit by wiggling it back and forth some, and then you'll be able to tilt it a little bit and pull it away from the fender. Rear does the same thing, but it's against the wheel. You gotta walk the caliper open a little bit to get down there. I got some Mondo zip ties that I use for this kind of thing. Another weird one from Harley. 10mm, 12-point. Find a place where they sit. I got highway pegs, so it's just kind of sitting right there. You make it tighter if you want. sensor cable on the other one. I'm going to cut all the zip ties holding it. So when I'm trying to mess with getting the axle out and things like that, I'm not fighting the cable tension. And I've got my caliper secured where it can't bang on the fender. So that sensor is like the rear, just a little puck that sits against the bearing. When you pull the axle out, it should just fall free. A little wiggle and it'll come out, and then you'll have it attached to the bike only. Next thing I'm going to do before I start jacking the bike up is get this stuff off here. I'm not going to take the fairing off. I'm going to work behind it, and I'm going to end up taking the tank off just to get to the rear cover. There is a tool you can get to take the lock, the ignition lock off the bike, and then that keeps you from having to take the tank off, but I don't have the tool, so you can probably fight with it and get the little plastic cover out of there without taking the tank off, but I don't think it's worthwhile. I'd rather drop the tank, get the tank out of the way, so when I'm wrenching in here later, getting the forks back in, I'm not banging the tank in any way, so I'm going to get the tank out of the way. Once that's out of the way, we'll jack the bike up. This stuff will be off, and then we'll pull the axle out, drop the front tire, take the fender off, and then start dropping the forks. The whole thing, disassembling the whole thing should take less than an hour. If you've done this over and over and over again, I bet you can do it in a half an hour or less. Like I said, first time, I'm winging it at this point. I'm not looking at the owner's manual. I'll look at the owner's manual for specs and things when I put it back together. If you don't have some good shop blankets, get yourself some anytime you're working on motorcycle painted parts. On some of these guys, or moving blankets. This one's a good one because it's soft and pliable. So if I was working on the fairing, I would put it in here and cover up the fender. I'm not actually doing much over the fender, so I'm not going to worry about it for now. I'm going to throw this off in the corner over here. We're going to pull some stuff off the back, painted parts go on here. Got a couple things you need to know about taking the tank off. First thing is, I always use an impact gun. Battery powered, I don't use one off the compressor. These are real handy, they're light, they're easy to use, batteries last forever, it's 20 volt lithium ion. They're like 70 bucks worth of tool that gives you a lot more than 70 bucks worth of use. This is from Lowe's, and you get a little bit. So I got a 3/8 inch drive. I got a 40 Torx, and I'm gonna run 4 bolts out of the tank. There's 1, 2, 3 on this side, another one on that side, making 4 bolts. You got a couple of connectors here. You just pull your fuel pump connector. There's a hard line that separates right here, and then you got a vent line or an overflow that goes all the way down to the ground. What I do with this is I pull it all the way up, and then I just put new zip ties on it when I put the tank back on. It's pretty easy. Plastic covers up front come off. Vent hose. Right there. Fuel pump connector. Leave this one in place. Don't pull it out. This other guy here, hopefully you can see that on the screen. This little guy, you disconnect it, leave it in place. It's a bitch to fish back down there. Tank is all disconnected except for the fuel pump. There's a banjo connection or some kind of connection here. If you got a rag, grab your rag to catch your fuel. It's like a little compressor fitting. Push up. Pull down on the hose. Now this is my line going to the fuel injectors. Tank's now totally free. Don't double check that I'm free. You don't want to get jerked back when you pull the tank off. Make sure you're free. Turn around. Put your tank in a safe place. Nothing worse than scratching the shit out of your tank when you don't want to. I got the alarm on my bike, so I got to keep the key closed. You could obviously pull the main fuse, disable the alarm. Not really needed. Alright, we'll go back to pulling the front end apart here. Get clearance to pull the forks. You got 2 1/2 inch over on this side. Lights come off, lights unplug. The light's in a safe place. Now from 1/2 inch you step up. I'm going to pull this, make sure I can see all the way around. So I got a 9/16. It's actually a bolt. It's one of the mounts for your whole fairing. Okay, bottom fascia of the fairing off. Taking this guy off. That's going to give me access to the trees. With the tank out of the way, it's a super simple process. Actually, it's not important. We're going back to an Allen. Okay. 4mm. There's probably a standard SAE equivalent. A little bit of screw on the side. This guy fishes down. There's 2 connectors that are like dummy connectors behind it for your accessory plugs. If this was an Ultra, you would have plugs going to switches. But you've got to get these dummy plugs out of the way. Get that guy off. Okay. Got one of the bolts, another bolt here, 2 down on the lower half, 2 down on the other side. I've got access to get my forks out. I can go ahead and pull them. I use an Amazon special platform jack. With my lights. Make sure you get it somewhere on the frame. Right here, the kickstand's in the way. So I'm going to kick that out. Get it out of the way. I've got a 1/2 inch drive and a 22 inch. It's helpful to have the bike in gear. It is, because I just rode it in there. Drive it up. Okay, bike's in the air, right? Boom. Spacer on the right side. Get your other spacer, it's got the built-in ABS sensor. Fenders are like my arch nemesis. I fucked up more than one of them. So put something over it. If you're working over it, cover it immediately. I'm taking it off, but I'm going to take this towel, put it right on here, see if I can tape it in place without making too much of a disaster. Quarter inch. The other one's still really tight. It's not going to do anything on me. Get in here and hug it like a little baby. We'll break the other one loose. Of course, this happens to be the tightest one. Let's try to drag the fender all over the place. This one feels like it's cross-threaded. I'm going to put this other one back in, give a little bit of support while I get the other one out of place. Typical Harley fuck up, and this other one all jimmy jacked. Okay. You hear all the noise the thing was making, that's a mess. That's not coming up on here and still yet. Alright, fender's out. No paint contact. Okay. We'll pull that right one out first. At this point, I got enough movement. I'm moving around a little bit to get some clearance if I need to. These are just regular clamp, tree clamps. You don't have to take them all the way out. Some parts that are going around a rod, the rod is machined for the bolt. You're not going to find that here. In theory, this thing should drop out as soon as I loosen up this other bolt. Okay. The interesting thing I noticed coming from Metrics is that these don't have dust covers. Normally there'd be a dust seal on a metric fork, even if it had a shroud over it. I've always seen dust shields on them. So you don't have that to deal with. It makes it a little bit easier. If you were just going to put those Axeo front end cartridges in, you could disassemble a fork, clean it out, put them in, tighten it up, put them back in the bike. I'm going to be putting the chrome lowers on, so I've got to disassemble it anyways to get the top part of the fork out. Also, if you've got any amount of years, so this is 2015, this one of my wife's are both 2015s, they sat parked for several years with the prior owners, and they only had a couple thousand miles on them. Sitting like that makes me worry a little bit about the fork seals. And then we put 10,000 miles on them this year. We'll do 10,000 miles every year from here on out. I don't want to have to worry about the fork seals. I'm already tearing this whole thing apart, so I'm going to do the fork seals now. I'll rebuild the whole thing. We'll put new bushings and everything in it. Even got new bolts and seals that go on the bottom. So I'm going to take care of that. First thing we do, take this guy out of the bottom, go through here with an impact, run it out, and then you can drain it, and then pull your top off. This is a 3/4 inch Allen, I believe. If not, I'll let you know what it is. I'm going to use a vise with some jaws in it, a rag around here, and some rubber jaws. There are fork holders for this kind of thing. It's a good idea to have them if you got them. And then take this off. It's going to be under spring pressure, so as you take it off, you want some support on it. Then you just take a flat blade screwdriver, pop out the retainer here. This thing's loose. You take the cartridge out of the inside of it, and then you slide hammer this apart until the seal pushes out. All right, while nobody's looking, I'm going to go put this guy on the right side of the bike. I'm notorious for doing stuff like this, leaving an old part on, assembling it all, and then realizing I got to take it all apart. So I need to do this now before I get into this and get sidetracked. So here we are, a couple days later. Ran into not having the right tool. So what you need is a 12mm Allen wrench that'll take an impact. I've got a 12mm Allen wrench, but it's not deep enough. So this one happens to be about 4 inches long to get in there and get on that nut. So that's what you need to be able to get in and drain this guy. So I'll post a link to this. It's an Amazon item for long reach applications. This is a 12mm hex. 8556 is the model number from CTA Manufacturing. It was 12 bucks delivered from Amazon. I'm kind of a freak with these things. When it's a one-off item and I can't find it locally, I'll order 2 of them. That way if I break one, I've got a backup. So I went 6 different places here in town in Colorado and couldn't find anything that would do that. So we're actually 2 days later from when I shot the original part of the video to get this taken care of. Additionally, to pop the top off, you're going to need a 19mm Allen key. And you can probably do it by hand if you had a clamp. I'm going to use the impact gun because I don't have a clamp. I can put it in the vise, and I've done it in the past. You just run a chance, even with the jaws. I've got rubber jaws and things I use. You run a chance of scratching up your upper fork tube, and if it gets scratched in the area that goes inside the seal, it'll wear the seal and you'll end up with a leak. So you gotta be careful with that. And these aren't super strong. You know, if you put them in a vise and crank down on them, you can crush them a little bit. So you gotta be careful. So that'll be the next thing I do, is to pop the top on this guy, drop all the internals out, and we'll be good to go. While I'm working on that, I'm actually going to take a rag, shove it in the hole that the axle goes through, because it's going to continue to leak, and I don't want to get grease everywhere. You can see with that disconnected at this point, the whole thing slides up and down. So you can kind of work some of that oil out of there. Once I pop the top and take the internals out, we'll pry off the spring clip on the inside and slide hammer the fork open. Because the electric impact is so much easier to use and doesn't risk running this off super fast, I'm going to give that a try, see if we get anywhere with it. So you can see it broke loose, spun some. You need to keep some hand tension on it because it's going to want to pop up. And at that point, we're inside. You get your spring spacer, preload spacer. Spring will come out. The damper rod. And then you can really let this guy drain for a second before going on any further. All right, so there's your side-by-side comparisons. All the same parts that were in it are going back in essentially, but they're in a little bit different format. Instead of a damper rod down at the bottom, you've got like the support rod down here that holds the top out spring. And then the new internal spring that makes it work. Your preload setting is now here. You have no adjustable preload in these guys. What adds the preload is when you clamp the whole thing together and run the screw top in, you're then compressing the spring, and that's why it looks longer. You take some of that length out when you compress it down. And then you've got a dual chamber shock piston in here. So you got a free floating piston that runs up and down to help handle the dampening. And then this cap is all integrated, so it's one piece now. So with this guy drained out most of the way, we're going to go ahead and take it apart. I'm just going to take a rag, shove it inside so I'm not slinging oil everywhere. You can then at this point start to spray brake cleaner down inside of it if you wanted to, and get it all rinsed out while you're working on it. But I'll skip that for now and then just hose it out when I'm all done. You see the little flat blade screwdriver to get these clamps with a clip. Just got to grab one of the ends. There you go. Once the clip comes out, the only thing holding this together is the fact that there's a lip on the inside, and then the seal's in the way. All right. So that's all pulled apart. You got your seal here. Pull that guy out. Seal goes in the trash. This is the whole reason I'm breaking it down. These seals, they look worn, but they're not leaking yet. They're not that old, or I should say they don't have that many miles on them yet. They're sitting around 10,000 miles on both the bikes. But we bought the bikes this year with, one of them had less than 2,000 miles, the other one had less than 3,000 miles. So I'm going to go ahead and do a rebuild, and I'll never have to deal with the forks again while I own them. So you have two bushings that provide that pick up the slop inside the fork. We're going to take both those off and we're going to install new ones. This is the fork rebuild kit that comes from Harley. You get a new seal, of course, the two new bushings, new seal for the bottom screw, new clip, and a couple parts we're not going to use. This is for the top screw, the top screw cap that holds everything together. This goes on the damper. We're not going to use that. We will use this other spacer here that goes underneath the fork. Or sorry, the seal. You can see over here where my bolt came out of the bottom. There's no seal, so make sure you get that out of the bottom hole before you start reassembling. Grab yourself some parts cleaner and get all the old oil out of these things. Inside the bottom fork leg, you've got a spacer. There we go. Spacer needs to be reused. They only send you one of them. One of them in the kit from the Legend guys. It's because this bike has at least one, it might have two, I'm not sure. And then some of the other models will only have one. So they send you one at least to make sure you've got them. Spacer goes right there. And I'll show you how that goes when we get ready to finish assembly. So new bushing goes on. They don't index anyway, they just sit there. These other parts, when it comes apart, it looks like it's just floating. And you think, what's going on there? They're not floating. So this looks like it's just kind of floating in this area. This whole little pack and the seal seat down inside the lower leg, and they stay stationary inside the lower leg. So this is the new Harley chrome fork leg. It's going to be the right side that we're working on here. All right, so proper spacer in there. So it goes in like a cup with the opening at the top. And just make sure it sits in your index point. All right, so at this point I would take the upper bushing. So I've got the spacer in there, sitting correctly. I drop the upper trunnion in, and it'll hold it in place. Then I take the other spacer, drop it in, or other bushing, and just give a little bit of push here. It'll seat down when you drive the next couple pieces in. I just want to make sure that it's sitting right and I'm not ramming it down in the wrong place. All right, so then your big washer looking thing goes there. That protects the seal from that guy. If you don't have it all the way down, you're not going to be able to get your seal seated, which causes you a problem. Seal driver is helpful to have. You don't have to have it. You can get PVC pipe or something. You hear the difference there when it hit bottom. So my new bushing is all the way down. That big O-ring is down, or the big washer is down. At this point I can put my seal in. I normally put a little bit of grease or oil or something on the seal insides. Harley's, the manufacturer here it's not a Harley product, it's Showa from Japan. They've chamfered the top edge so you kind of lower the risk of screwing up your seals when you put them on. I've had some other upper trunnions that are super sharp, and if you just run them straight on, you'll end up cutting the seals up. So you want to take like some electrical tape and put it over there. But this is real nice, it's chamfered off. Obviously they went to a little bit of extra effort there. But I'm going to go ahead and grab a little bit of the oil that comes with it and put it on the inside of the seal. So that's all set. I'm going to slide that seal over. The ring portion of it goes down. You'll see like a spring, I should say. Slide that guy over. You want to seat it by hand first. Make sure it's even. And you just give it some wax with this guy. There is a little ring that that lock spring sits into, so this guy here. When you see that ring exposed, you're seated all the way. Once you kind of push that ring in there, I'm just taking a screwdriver, just push it down so it locks, and you hear it pop into place. Once it pops into place, that's it. I mean, these things are together. I'm going to go ahead and leave it compressed, and I'm going to double check. Well, I can pull it up a little bit and look down inside and see that my spacer didn't move. I didn't disrupt it at all. It's still sitting in the right place. So I'm ready to move forward with that. All right, so we're going to double check the instructions here. Next thing I've got to do is make the adjustment for rider weight. So we're going to take this guy, take that off. I had it there just to show you how it works. Get some of my stuff out of the way here. And there's an Allen screw on this adjuster. It's a 1/8. So 1/8 Allen key. And I'm going to remove that. Just show you real quick. That's what I'm taking off right here. So this guy, we're going to go ahead and do some red thread lock. I don't use red thread lock much. If anybody's ever played around with it, it is like almost like welding something. You put it on a couple bolts. We're going to take our provided top-out springs, put them on the kit here, and then I'm going to do the whole thing kind of standing up. Yep. I can see my bottom of my top out cup, and I can see the bottom of the Legend part. So I'm going to go ahead and take this guy, a bolt there, hand thread this in. I'm just going to give it a hit with this guy here. Once we get the whole thing rebuilt, I will attempt to throw a little bit more torque on it with the torque wrench. So Legend wants 9.6 ounces of the oil into the shock. And I converted that to milliliters, which is 283 milliliters. I've got a 100 milliliter syringe here. As long as I don't make a total mess. If you listen real close, you can hear some air bubbles. Okay, you can feel it stiffen up some as the air bubbles flush out. Okay, so we've got the right amount of oil in there now. We can give it a few more pumps. All right, I don't hear any oil or any air. Get the new rebuilt fork up in place. Alright, took a little work, but got it all set to where they're totally even on the top, and the axle slides right in and out. Interesting finding was when I put this fork leg back in, it was longer or shorter than the factory one. It was maybe a quarter inch shorter than the factory one. Swap out, put this one in, and they're the same length. So there's something in the Legend kit that's just a tad shorter than the factory, which is totally fine. They do match, however, so that indicates to me that there's nothing assembled wrong. So this is the new chrome front end. As I get this install finished, I'll be putting in chrome hardware. sure there's a billion different ways to do this easily. I've got the bike on 2 different jacks. So all I do is, you saw me line it up over here, I run the rear jack up until the axle looks flat. Then I don't have to wrestle with the tire to get it back in place. That's it. Axle goes in. I didn't hurt my back trying to do it. Axle 75 foot-pounds. The other thing that's interesting about Harleys, this is free floating. On all the other bikes I've worked on, when you tighten up the axle, it sucks the other fork leg in. So this has some movement to it. And all the owner's manual says to do is push this in to the wheel so it makes contact, and apparently you were good. 22 foot-pounds is what it calls for. Just looking for some way to clamp it without getting my dirty fingers all over the rubber. These calipers go into place. They are installed with 48 foot-pounds. Two chrome bolts are going in. Got thread lock on these. right, so what I think. I had a hard time pinpointing what I didn't like about the handling of the bike before. And this just completely fixed any of that. So I'll just give you a quick look at the chrome front end. The fork shrouds turned out good. I plan to do a new wheel at some point, just the same wheel but in chrome. So, all right, to get back to what I was saying about what it changed. The bike feels solid now. It doesn't kind of jitter jatter all over the road in turns, which it used to, which would kind of leave me uneasy when you're coming across uneasy surfaces. The bike would do a lot of shuddering in the front end. And that's all fixed. So the bike feels solid, the traction feels better, and I don't perceive that it rides rougher. One of the things that Chase had said from Legend was that it'd be firmer. I didn't necessarily notice that, and it may be that a lot of times I was bottoming out the factory suspension. So that was that harsh, firm feeling I had. What I feel is a solid, good ride now. So now we got to move on to this one. So I got the same setup. It's going to arrive UPS today for the other bike, and she's going to keep those fork legs. So it'll be a little bit easier of a job. I'm still going to change the fork seals and go from there, but knock that one out next. All right, I did a piss poor job of explaining what this changed on the bike. So when I got done with my wife's bike today, I took it out. She got a new front tire, so I wanted to do some miles on the highway on the front tire, so she wasn't driving or riding on a brand new front tire when she went out. So I got about 40 miles on it, rode it fairly hard, and it all kind of came together what was wrong on the bike before. So I think the stock front suspension was so stiff that it didn't have any droop in it. So when you're cornering hard through a corner that has any bumps, I would routinely lose traction on the front end. So I'd have the front end slipping and sliding all over the place beforehand. Now with this setup on either one of the bikes, cornering through rough roads, it just tracks perfectly like it's supposed to. I didn't lose any traction. It was not a rough ride. So Chase at Legend had said that this was like a sport suspension. It would be firmer than stock, and that's not really what I'm perceiving. I'm perceiving that it's more plush, but yet the bike handles so much better. It tracks over road grooves and expansion joints on the highway. No big deal. There's no more jolts in the bike that used to just jar you when you were riding anywhere. So the pleasure factor on riding is much higher now because it's so much more comfortable. But yet when you kick it around through some tight turns, the bike handles just extremely better, and it's better than I thought it would be. So I'll put it that way. The bike, even though this is not the lowering kit for this bike, they have a lower one and they have a regular one, and then they have one for a 21-inch wheel, which I assume is maybe increasing the bump stop limit so that the fender doesn't contact the frame. But this is the standard kit. The kit part number ends in 494, and the bike sits about an inch lower. So I had got a hold of Chase after I was done from Legend and said, hey, the bike sits about an inch lower. Is this normal for a standard height kit? He said, yes, it's a standard height kit. Now you have an inch of sag in the front suspension, which is what's going to make the ride more plush. You actually have some ability to handle dips in the road and things, especially that's what I'm perceiving in the corners, is that it's so much better in the corners because it's able to track the road instead of being totally stiff and fully extended like the stock one is with just a single rider on it. So there is a little bit loss in ground clearance you get. I didn't really notice it
in corners or at low speed turns, hitting sooner or anything like that. But it was a huge difference, and you don't visually pick up on it all that much. If the bike's lower, I had to measure it to see and compare the two bikes. So this was a huge improvement, and people say that I think even Legend quoted 80% of the ride is from the rear of the bike. Well, we changed the rear suspension quite a while ago, and I didn't notice as vast of an improvement in handling or the ride as I did with the front. So I think the front really is a requirement if you're trying to get the bike to ride and handle how you want. You're not going to get what you're after with just changing the rear shocks if you're going to leave the front factory suspension in there. So it's definitely worth the time and effort to put the front end in these bikes. I'm glad I did both of them, and now we just got to get some miles on them, and I can give you a report back on the longevity of things. I would assume this will go the life of the bike that we have them. We'll probably keep these bikes for about 5 years and then turn them over for new ones, I would assume. And you know, if they prove to be standing up real well over time, we'll be putting Legend stuff right back on the new bikes when we get them.